Before we dive into the myths, the art, and the theology, let's take a step back to the very beginning. Every culture has an origin story, but few have shaped humanity like this one. You've heard it in Sunday school, seen it in paintings, maybe even questioned it in quiet moments. The story of Adam and Eve. But what if everything you thought you knew about that story, the apple, the serpent, even the creation of woman, was built on mistranslations, missing pages, and borrowed myths thousands of years older than the Bible itself? In this deep dive, we'll uncover 10 hidden truths buried beneath centuries of faith and folklore. From forgotten goddesses to the real meaning of the rib, from linguistic puns to ancient propaganda, this is the Garden's Secrets, the 10 lies you were told about Adam and Eve. If you love exploring history's biggest mysteries and challenging the stories we've always been told, make sure to subscribe. We're on the road to 10,000 curious minds uncovering the truth together.
Tracing the roots, Adam and Eve's ancient ancestors. Our first revelation shatters the idea of a singular origin. The Adam and Eve story is not an original Bible creation. To understand the story of Genesis, you have to realize that ancient cultures didn't operate in a vacuum. Ideas, myths, and gods traveled faster than you might think. Just as a modern blockbuster movie often borrows elements from classic literature, the story in Genesis pulled from highly successful, resonant tales that were already popular in the ancient world. First, ancient Egypt. Meet the god Khnum. He wasn't a warrior or a sun god. He was the divine potter. His job was literally to sculpt human beings from clay on his potter's wheel. Clay, the raw material, is the same. Next, shift to Greek mythology. We look to the Titan Prometheus. He is credited with creating mankind, again from clay and water, and then suffering eternal punishment for giving them fire. The idea of a divine being forming humanity from the very dirt of the earth, dust to dust, was a universal, powerful concept. The biblical authors adopted this winning formula. But the most compelling evidence of cross-pollination lies in Mesopotamia, the region between the Tigris and Euphrates, the place many scholars believe the Garden of Eden story itself was written down. Two ancient epics predate Genesis, the Babylonian Enuma Elish and the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Enuma Elish involves the use of dust to fashion humans. The Epic of Gilgamesh is even more striking. Gilgamesh is tricked by a serpent and loses his chance at immortality. Later, a woman disrupts the peaceful primal state of the male heroes. Creation from dust, a serpent deceives man. Man loses immortality, woman disrupts paradise. It's clear, the Genesis account is a masterful adaptation. It took the most powerful, dramatic, and enduring plot points from the region's existing sagas, stories about lost immortality and serpentine deceit, and wove them together to create a new narrative centered around a single, all-powerful God. An ancient literary masterpiece built on recycled epic foundations. Lilith, the rebel, and the mystery of the rib. The common narrative suggests Adam's first relationship was with Eve, but according to ancient Jewish folklore, the Garden of Eden saw a truly explosive first marriage. Adam had a previous wife, Lilith. Lilith is one of the most compelling and tragic figures in ancient mythology. The story goes that God created Adam and Lilith simultaneously from the same dust. This is key. She saw herself as his absolute equal. When Adam demanded dominance in their relationship, Lilith refused. She saw the hierarchy as an injustice. In a powerful act of defiance, Lilith uttered the sacred name of God, which gave her the power to fly, and she flew out of Eden, completely abandoning paradise and her husband. She couldn't be controlled. She wouldn't submit. As a result, she was demonized, literally, becoming a terrifying demon figure in later Judaic mythology, associated with the night and seduction. The story of Lilith is crucial because it reveals the perceived flaw in the first creation attempt: uncontrolled equality and defiance. So, God scrapped the first model and tried again, creating a woman specifically designed to be part of the man, Eve. She was not made from the dust of the earth, but from Adam's own body. And here is where the next translation problem comes in. We've been told for centuries that Eve was made from a rib, but the Hebrew word tsela is a linguistic ghost. While translated as rib in this single famous context, it usually means side, column, plank, or the limbs lateral to the vertical axis of the body. It was not necessarily a rib. It was a bone from his side, a structural piece. But some scholars have gone further, proposing a deeply anatomical theory. The missing bone wasn't a rib, but the baculum, the penis bone. Humans are one of the few mammals that lack this bone. Many primates and other mammals have it. The theory suggests to create Eve, God performed a surgical act on Adam, taking this bone. The result? A defining anatomical difference in humanity and a constant, invisible reminder of Eve's origin. Whether it was a rib, a side, or a lost baculum, the message is the same. Eve's creation was a deliberate counterpoint to Lilith. She was physically built into Adam's structure, ensuring that their bond was eternal, and their roles were perhaps less equal than Lilith demanded. The Great Fruit Conspiracy and the Serpent's Identity. The central act of the drama is the consumption of the forbidden fruit. It's the original trigger, the event that changed the world forever. And let's face the truth, it was not an apple. The Bible is intentionally ambiguous. The Hebrew text uses the word peri. It means simply fruit, any fruit. The first thing they do after eating it is fashion loincloths out of fig leaves, suggesting the possibility of a fig. It could have been a grape, a pomegranate, or an apricot. The identity was not specified. So how did the apple win this historical casting call? It comes down to a pun in translation, a simple joke in the 4th century that became global doctrine. The scholar Jerome was tasked with translating the entire Bible into Latin, a version known as the Vulgate. In Latin, the word malus is a beautifully ironic dual-meaning word. It means both evil and apple. It was too perfect. Jerome used malus to describe the fruit from the tree of knowledge, creating a profound poetic association between the fruit and the act of sin. This association, this pun, took root. Centuries later, the poet John Milton solidified this notion in his epic Paradise Lost. Milton, following the Latin tradition, described the fruit as an apple. When one of the greatest poets in the English language writes it, the idea becomes cemented in the popular imagination. A linguistic joke became a foundational truth. Now, who was the tempter? Was it the devil? In the original, earliest versions of Jewish theology, Satan as a figure of ultimate evil, a fallen angel, a cosmic adversary, was not fully established. The serpent in Genesis is introduced as a creature, described as cunning, but not necessarily a supernatural demon. The primary focus of the early story was simple human choice and temptation. It was only much later, as theology evolved, that the serpent was retroactively identified with the devil to provide a clear, eternal villain in the cosmic drama.
Consequences and contradictions in paradise. The moment they ate, the consequences were delivered, especially to Eve. Genesis 3:16 details the punishment. I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will birth children. This sentence has had real-world impact. For hundreds of years, this verse was interpreted as a divine decree against relieving the pain of childbirth. the suffering was seen as mandatory. But once again, the linguistic fog clears. The Hebrew word translated as pain is etzev. While it can mean sorrow or anguish, in almost every other biblical instance, etzev is translated as labor, toil, or work. What if the decree wasn't about agony, but about difficulty and exhaustive effort? What if the punishment was that creating the next generation, the very continuation of life, would require immense, grueling work? The suffering is certainly part of the toil, but the curse itself may be better understood as the burden of difficult labor now inherent in the process of life. Now, let's travel east to a completely different interpretation, Islam's version of Adam and Eve and the Quran. The story exists, but with one monumental theological difference. Islam does not recognize the concept of original sin. In the Quran, both Adam and Eve are tempted by Iblis to eat from the tree. They both fail, but crucially, they both immediately repent, praying to God for mercy and forgiveness. God forgives them both. The sin is not inherited. Humanity is not born eternally guilty of their ancestors' mistake. The focus shifts from eternal punishment to God's boundless mercy and the personal nature of sin. You are responsible for your own choices, not the choices of your ancestors. After their expulsion, the tradition holds they spent 200 years apart before reuniting and raising a family that included 20 sets of twins, a story of massive failure followed by profound grace. Finally, let's touch upon a darker intellectual consequence of the story, the pre-Adamite theory. This idea, emerging in 1655, suggested that there were people on Earth before Adam and Eve. The theory was dangerous. It argued that not all people could be descendants of the perfect, divinely created original pair. And who did this theory conveniently exclude? Non-Europeans. This warped pseudo-theological argument was then used to justify that those excluded were inherently inferior, providing a horrific rationale for the institution of slavery. The purest story of human origin was twisted into one of the darkest tools of human oppression. Conclusion: the true Genesis. So, after stripping away the layers of misinterpretation, what is the definitive truth of Adam and Eve? The truth is, there isn't one. The story is a tapestry woven from ancient Mesopotamian flood epics, the defiance of the first wife Lilith, a 4th century Latin pun that gave us the apple, and centuries of theological debate over the meaning of a rib. It is a narrative so fundamentally powerful that it dictates our view of relationships, biology, geography, and yes, the search for the literal Garden of Eden continues today, driven by the biblical clues of the 4 rivers pointing toward modern-day Iraq or Armenia. Even science has offered its own version, identifying mitochondrial Eve and Y-chromosomal Adam, the common ancestors of our DNA. But the science is clear. They were not the first humans, and they lived thousands of years apart. The story of Adam and Eve endures not because it's a simple historical fact, but because it is the most magnificent, enduring myth humanity has to explain the great mysteries. Why is there good? Why is there evil? And why is life so beautifully, frustratingly complicated? It is the story that explains why we were evicted from paradise and why we've been trying to find our way back ever since. Which of these hidden secrets about the Garden of Eden shocked you the most? Did you ever question the apple? And what do you believe was the true nature of the fruit? Tell us your theories in the comments below.